Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the MCCI, I extend a warm welcome to all of you in this very special e-session on the outlook of the economy due to COVID-19 surge and the impact on the banking sector. Friends, we have in the second year of our struggle with the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has resulted in a severe human tragedy and an economic paralysis for India. Our optimism and outlook seem to ride the pandemic wave. After 2 quarters of economic contraction, India bounced back on a V-shaped economic trajectory. During the first quarter of this year, India was recognized as the second most resilient economy in the world after Germany. The second wave triggered state government-induced restrictions that slowed down the economic trajectory. With the decrease of the second wave, we are witnessing first signs of revival in the form of rising power consumption or 15% growth of FMCG sales. However, at the same time, we remain wary about the third wave. The economic turmoil has had an obvious impact on the financial sector as well as banks in particular. The RBI played an exemplary role last year during the crisis with its monetary policy that helped facilitate the V-shaped recovery. The loan moratorium, for example, was a critical support needed by both industry and individuals. Even this year, the RBI has announced a slew of measures to help India tackle the unprecedented COVID-19 crisis during the second wave. Some of the key announcements are: banks can provide fresh lending support up to 50,000 crores to a wide range of entities, including vaccine manufacturers, importers and suppliers of vaccines and priority medical devices, hospitals and dispensaries, path labs, manufacturers and suppliers of oxygens and ventilators, importers of COVID-19 related drugs, logistic firms, and also patients for treatment. RBI has decided to conduct a special 3-year long-term repo operations of 10,000 crores for small finance banks, which primarily lend to micro, unorganized, and small industries. It is also proposed an extension of a measure for incentivizing the flow of credit up to Rs 25 crores to MSME borrowers. The RBI also asked the SFBs lending to MFIs will be classified as priority sector lending. SFBs are now being permitted to lend to smaller MFIs with assets up to 500 crores, and this is likely to help individual borrowers on priority. This facility will also be available up to 31st March 2022. The RBI has also rationalized certain KYC compliance requirements in view of COVID-19 second wave. The RBI also announced certain relaxation with regard to availment of OD facility by states. However, the slowdown has obviously accentuated the problem of NPAs for the banking sector. While the regulatory moratorium may have held back some stress, the industry-wise composition of good quality loans of public and private sector banks reveals some of the industries with higher share of such loans across bank groups are severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The sectors with the highest share of good quality loans which might get affected, including general purpose loans by NBFCs, generation of electricity, NBFCs in the housing sector. Gross NPAs ratio was estimated to be in the range of 8.7% around March-April 2021, and it is expected that NPAs over 2 lakh crore will be moved from the books of banks to the newly formed National Asset Reconstruction Company, which was specifically set up to deal with the problem of rising NPAs. All these developments raise certain concerns about the economic outlook of our economy and how the banking sector is geared up to deal with this uncertain future. To help us understand this better, we are extremely honored to have with us Shri V.S. Radhakrishnan. Shri Radhakrishnan is the Deputy Managing Director of the State Bank of India. Shri Radhakrishnan joined the SBI as a probationary officer in 1988 and has worked as General Manager and Regional Head, CAG New Delhi, and Chief General Manager of the SBI Corporate Center, Mumbai. Shri Radhakrishnan has rich experience in corporate banking and works in both corporate accounts group and the commercial client group verticals of the bank, apart from Forex Treasury and retail network. Sir, we are extremely grateful to you for agreeing to address us today amidst a busy schedule. So, without much ado, I hope that his wisdom will help us to understand this current economic scenario and the future resilience of the economy of the country. So thank you, sir, and over to you. to give us your address.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I thank Merchant Chamber of Commerce, Calcutta, for inviting me to this webinar to speak on that COVID impact on the economy as well as on the banking sector. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and privilege to be here, and and also thank the nice introduction. So before getting into the topic, I just want to briefly touch upon where we stand in COVID. As most of you are in Calcutta and I sit in Bombay, that will be also of some interest in the sense that Bombay is the hotbed of fate for all the reasons, in terms of population and all. So to put it in perspective, if you see, sir, after the first wave peak witnessed in September 2020, the cases started declining, and which continued till, of course, the early 2021, and which gave us also a lot of hopes and positivity that we are on top of it. And in fact, the banking industry literally also started celebrating, because the reasons I will tell you a little later. So we were very confident that the worst is over, we are on. But unfortunately, as the economy started showing positive signs, the cases started climbing up again and growing. From mid-February and becoming too rapid sometime around April, dashing all our hopes of revival. The second wave turned out to be much more infectious, much more serious, and had a much more severe impact on the economy as well as on the society as large, and resulting in much larger deaths. We as a country, though we continue to fight the second wave and the various variants of the infection, I am tempted to believe, I put a rider there, I am tempted to believe the worst is over and the second wave is behind us. And most of what I'm going to speak also to a very large extent depend on the ability of the system, ability of the country as a society to withstand any future shocks in terms of waves and all. But I do have, going by the number of cases, case loads and all, it looks like we are slightly better placed now, and the second wave is slightly behind us. Having said that, the second wave has to a large extent affected the rural areas more than the cities. So in tier 3 and tier 4 semi-urban and rural areas, to that extent, that those centers witnessed much higher level of deaths, and so to some extent, rural demand also has taken some kind of a beating on account of this. But a good monsoon, and so a lot of hopes also are there. So, as coming to the vaccine status, which is seen as a solution for the problem, cumulatively around 300 million vaccine doses have been administered so far, and government is now planning to vaccinate 10 million per day from July, August 2021, and by in a year's time, expect the entire population, adult population, to be vaccinated. While this vaccination drive will sure help us to tide over the challenge in a big way, I do believe that vaccination by itself will not end the pandemic, and hence, as a society, as a country, we need to learn to live and cope with the COVID, and learn to find ways of doing business in ways in which COVID impact is absorbed. New normal is going to be the way forward for us, more so in the banking industry, which I will touch upon later. The pandemic has been a real shock with real consequences, and has touched every one of us in some form or other. And every one of us have our own colleagues, our own relatives suffering on account of COVID. It has been such a huge impact on the society. Hence, I do believe that ramping up the healthcare system in the country, finding money to spend on research and spend on logistics are all key to our future well-being. A formidable challenge in front of all of us, all public at large, all of us, and country, government authorities, all the administrators. It's quite a formidable challenge. And I'm sure that we will emerge stronger out of this crisis and rebuild our nation on solid foundations. So coming to the impact of it on the economy, COVID-19 has impacted the economy quite significantly last year. And across the board, I think barring China, Almost all the countries have reported negative growth, contraction of economy. I will not get into the numbers and percentage and things like that, because there are different claims are there, the different documents are there. Broadly speaking, that the entire world, it was a shock and everyone faced this as a problem. And contraction of economic activity has been unprecedented. But thanks to the fiscal authorities as well as monetary authorities in terms of liquidity infusion and also in terms of supporting directly households as well as firms, I think they managed to keep the problem from hitting economically the society in a big way. That way, I think to a large extent, we have to give credit to the various central banks and the governments, the way they reacted, the way they responded to the crisis, kept the crisis from taking still worse steps, still worse effects. So central banks provided adequate support. Of course, in India also, I mean, as Mr. Shah was articulating, there are plenty of liquidity measures and sector-specific measures which have been given by both government and as well as central bank, which provided huge relief for most of us in the industry and also to a large extent in the finance space and bankers. So coupled with the central banks and the government support also to households, all that helped us to sustain momentum in terms of how we handle the crisis. Sir, turning to the domestic economy in particular, we had a 7.3% contraction of GDP in FY21. However, if we take a closer look at Q4 FY21, GDP grew at 1.6, and it was the second consecutive quarter we had growth. It was also particularly manufacturing and construction activity led the spurt on the production side. On government consumption expenditure and government net investments helped us to grow. But unfortunately, the implementation of lockdown as a consequence of the second wave and the restrictions consequent to the lockdown definitely will create some kind of a disruption. Of course, numbers are also showing some of the some of the high frequency indicators like PMI manufacturing, PMI services, and also automobile manufacturing, e-way bill, power consumption, all that have also moderated sequentially to show that there is going to be some kind of a disruption to the positive numbers witnessed in Q4 of last year and the previous quarter. And so there is going to be some kind of a shock again, but still it looks to me like that the economy will bounce back sooner or later. And also the recent decline in the number of daily COVID cases has been encouraging, though we have to take it with a pinch of salt in the sense new variant is also Delta variants, Delta plus, and also the impact of COVID and the recent lockdown announced by various countries like Australia, Sydney lockdown, and many other Asian countries like Bangladesh, Thailand. It is a cause of concern, and positive part of it is how well the European countries and the US have come out of COVID-related restrictions and started bouncing back. There are positive things, and if we get our vaccination drive going, perhaps we can better handle this situation. There's a hope and expectation that most of the lockdowns may end sooner. I mean, maybe I will hear from you also when the interaction section, how you feel about it. But we broadly believe that by June end or July, we should be through with all the lockdowns. And so things may come back to normalcy. That is broadly the belief. But having said that, we need to be also careful to ensure that we don't, we don't let lower our guard in terms of COVID precautions and protocols, so that we don't become victim of a third wave. And so it is extremely important that we continue to observe all the precautions as a society to ensure that there is no third wave that hits us and our recovery takes firm roots. That's something which only time can tell. But I do believe that having gone through this, I think we are better off and we can better deal with this situation. Sir, one thing that one thing is that all of us, I'm sure that there can be no two opinion that all lockdowns and all that we do, keeping, I think, safety of people in mind, we need to move carefully so that we don't miss out on some of the critical things. Though we had some unexpected, things which we did not expect, the kind of hit that we took. But I hope so that things will improve from now onwards. So at this point, one need to be cautious also, sir, on the recovery process because, as I was mentioning, rural demand also, it seems has taken a hit. And also, to a large extent, we see consumer sentiments also have taken a big hit. And consumer sentiments are quite weak today. And also, concerns about medical expenses are pushing people to prioritize savings over spending. And also there is some amount of uncertainty in the minds of people, particularly middle class, about the continuity and future income potential. All these things coupled will have certain impact on demand unless the bounce back is very, very solid. So it only time can tell, but a lot of positive signs to be there to recover well and come back, but one has to be careful. So FY21 saw a large scale of job loss and income losses. One cannot also completely discard the fear in the minds of people in terms of whatever I said about savings and also about future income uncertainty. We did experience large scale job loss and income losses. Statistically speaking, the average number of people employed reduced significantly from 408 million in 2019-16 to 387 million in 2020-21. Significant fall. And this is reported by CMIE Consumer Pyramids Household Survey. And as per the CMIE estimates, the unemployment rate went up to 11.9% in May 2021, compared to 8% in April 2021, while 15 million jobs were lost in that month. So quite a big thing that can break the morale of many people. As the economy started to unlock again, unemployment rate has bounced back to 8%, around 8.7 now, as per the data available as on 13th June. But it's still much higher than the March levels that we have seen. So loss of job is real, and concerns on the demand side, which I was expressing, are too real to discard. That is why recovery on a firm footing holds the key for future. Another thing that has happened also as an impact of COVID on the economy is inequality. The inequality has reportedly gone up quite significantly in India. As per a Pew Research Center report, the middle class in India it seems to have shrunk by about 32 million. So a huge drop as a consequence of the downturn. And also number of people who are poor in India, those who earn $2 or less, is estimated to have increased by 75 million because of COVID-19 recession. So obviously it has hit us all very badly. So it's quite an area of concern. So a lot needs to be done to come back. And apart from this, also there is a widening income inequality and also gender inequality that has come up. It looks that women participation in labor force has come down quite significantly post-COVID. And hence a lot needs to be done to ensure that the recovery is built on solid foundations of business investment and productivity growth which addresses adequately concerns of job growth, poverty, inequality, to ensure that people live safely and people with better quality of life. So providing the right health care, providing the right working environment are the key challenges in front of all of us, the employers, and all of us, the authorities. I expect in this given circumstances, central bank on the policy front to continue to stay accommodative, even though the inflation threats are very real and they are being seen as getting out of control. But I do believe that notwithstanding the inflation challenges, government will continue, central bank will continue to have accommodative stand, and fiscal policy of the government also. I'm sure that FM, I'm also curiously waiting to see what FM has announced. So the government will have to boost consumption. I do appreciate that governments, whether be it central government or state government, they do have their own challenges. India is not a country like US with unlimited resources to no, they have their own constraints. It's not that all of us can appreciate the constraints, but notwithstanding that, it is extremely important that the state and central governments pump in their pump in demand and also boost the economy, and that is only possible only if they take a more liberal view on the fiscal front. It's a wish. I'm sure that all of you will share that wish. So gradual unwinding of lockdowns and faster vaccination and the broader coverage, the government's idea of one dose for the entire adult population, I'm sure will help us to recover from the loss of COVID-19. Let us hope, pray, and work towards those goals. Now, coming to most important aspect of the evening for me, how is it that it has impacted the banking industry, and how the banks can or will respond to this, and how they will respond to the needs of the society going forward. That is the most important aspect of the day. Before I get into the impact of COVID on the banking, I wish to state one thing about the industry. The banking industry as a whole stood up to the challenges posed by the pandemic. In physical terms, I'm talking, in making available the banking services considered to be an essential service almost throughout the pandemic period without any major disruption, subject to some lockdowns here and there by states, but uninterrupted service was extended by the bankers across the entire nation, and the employees, I mean, in fact, have stood like warriors, and they put up a brave front and did discharge their duties, and they deserve a huge round of applause from all of you, because huge challenges were faced by all of us in the industry to provide those kind of uninterrupted banking services to the country, and the employees did a phenomenal job. And truly speaking, that is something which we were very proud of as top management in the banks, what our ground level people delivered. And it's not that it has come without pain. It has come with a huge cost to share the data. I mean, it's, though I can't say it is a data, to share the information. In State Bank only, we lost around 774 of our colleagues to COVID during the pandemic. And close to 60,000 of our colleagues suffered COVID and recovered from the COVID, and still some 1,400 people are still undergoing COVID-related treatments. On top of all these things, people stood up to the challenges and volunteered and extended huge service to the society and this moment of crisis. And I will just say that the bankers' contribution is quite a humongous one, given the COVID. So, I mean, I'm just very fondly recollecting the contributions made by many of the bank employees. And coming back to the topic of impact of COVID on banking sector, current crisis is more of a real economic crisis, in the sense that it is not so much a financial crisis or a banking industry crisis in the way we were used to that, be it 2007-8 meltdown that we all faced, or be it 2014-15-16 crisis of banking industry where banks were saddled with huge challenges. This is more of a economic crisis of the real economy. And having said that, I wouldn't say that it's not a crisis for banks. So as I was mentioning earlier, economy and banking are so interconnected. What is good, bad for one is worse for the other kind of. In that sense, yes, it is also a crisis for economy, for the banking industry. In that sense, yes, we are also under stress, and we are also under the crisis that all of you are facing in the economy. But by itself, it's not a banking crisis, which is a blessing, I will say, why I will articulate little later. To put the banking industry's issues in perspective today, they are twofold. Primarily, they are twofold. One is the challenges that we face on credit growth front. There is a huge slowdown in credit growth. In fact, if you observe, This is the lowest that has got credit growth has gone at 5.3% credit growth in FY21. It is the lowest in the last 13 quarter. I think the last 4-5 years this is the lowest one. And also the second challenge that we are facing, we will continue to face as the introductory message also it was highlighted, is the asset quality concerns that could emerge on account of COVID-19, and how with the real economy getting affected by COVID, and naturally large corporates and many corporates suffering on account of economy losses in the economy and slowdown in the economy, obviously it will have its own impact on us. These are the two major concerns that the banking industry is facing today. If you look at the deposit front, we are quite strong. Growth is quite significant, strong. And as I was mentioning, that the preference of savings over consumption also helps in accumulation of deposit. And the growth of deposit in May 2021 is around 10%, 9.7%. So deposit growth is significant. And the real challenge is, on the one hand, having deposit growth, on the other hand, not able to grow on the credit. That hurts. So I will say that. So credit offtake, poor credit offtake, which I was mentioning, having a low credit, this is the major challenge that we are facing. Probably you may have a different view when we interact. I'm sure. But credit offtake is a matter of serious concern for the lending banking industry on account of this COVID. See, there is a huge slowdown. The way the credit offtake is poor is on account of various reasons. First and foremost about them is that there is a huge slowdown in fresh capex commitments by private sector. There's a scaling down of and deferring of capex is something which is happening in a big way that results in poor credit offtake. And also, large corporates have gone in a big way to deleverage their balance sheets. And there are some empirical evidence to support that 1,000 listed companies have been studied, and the corporate leverage has come down to 0.46 multiple of the total equity, which has been a historical low number. This is also something which comes to hurt. And deleveraging is also done through various measures, including accessing the equity market, and also selling off core non-core assets, and also deferring certain capex and using the accrued cash, internal cash, to pay off the debt, apart from also borrowing from the bond market to cut down the cost. Of course, bond market borrowing to cut down bank will not result in deleverage, but it results in cutting off cost. But significant deleveraging is seen in our portfolios, and also data supports analysis done by some external agency also supports that serious efforts are made by large listed corporates to cut down their cost. Obviously, it makes commercial sense for those who can cut debt will cut to make their business more profitable. And also, the uncertainty associated today with the economy creates its own anxiety in the minds of lenders in assessing the risk for certain businesses. This is also one factor which is there, apart from some amount of risk aversion that has been built in the system in the finance space. These are largely some of the reasons, I will say, which has led to the slowdown in credit. This situation of deposit-led liquidity coupled with poor credit offtake has also led to some amount of severe competition amongst lenders. What we are doing in the banking industry, most of us are chasing few AAA good public sector borrowers and keep pumping money into their hands at rates which are historically low, resulting in banks' profitability taking a bigger beating. This is what is happening, and in my view, this is not something that will go on forever. This is something which is more of a short-term nature. Once the economy bounces back, once growth starts coming in, when new capex and new investment cycle starts, I'm sure that fresh avenues for deploying credit will bounce back, and this kind of competition will go. But one of the challenges that we are facing today is this competition chasing few good public sector accounts where we are going overboard in cutting costs, whereby our margins go down. So, I mean, as a credit growth issue, I have already discussed is something that is a cause of serious concern. But the credit to medium industries, credit growth is muted as far as large corporates are concerned, whereas credit to medium industries, SME, MSME, and all has registered significant growth, which is around 28.8% in March 2021. Growth of 28% is registered in March 2021 or previous year. And this reflects to a large extent the positive measures taken by both Government of India and Reserve Bank of India for the MSME sector. We have also been very positive in extending various schemes, which of course introductory message was articulated. All those measures were also very wholeheartedly done by the banking industry, which has resulted in significant growth in terms of MSME business, MSME lending. April 2021 data also indicates that the decline is there in the industry, lending to large industry, whereas credit growth is seen in agriculture and also personal consumption segment. So in this backdrop, we can look at what is it that we can do. Banks have talked out a clear business continuity plan for FY21 and earlier when the COVID attacked us, and which worked reasonably well. Banks have created contingency reserves, buffers to absorb shocks that may emerge from this COVID second wave as well as the earlier one. And hence the banks are fairly well cushioned in terms of reserves to absorb shocks that can come from the COVID. We need to, of course, we are yet to assess completely. It's still evolving. We are yet to assess the impact of second wave on asset quality, but we are fairly well placed to observe those things. Fortunately, to put the banking industry in perspective, fortunately, as I was mentioning also earlier, banking industry is in a reasonably good shape as compared to our own past history when we were badly hit by bad loans. When the economy was hit badly by COVID, fortunately for us in the banking industry, we are having fairly healthy balance sheets. To put our bank's health in perspective as a headline, PSU banks turned positive profit making after 5 consecutive years of losses. In 2021, most of us reported good profit numbers as against continuous losses in the past 5 years. That's one thing that speaks well about the financial health of the banks, PSU banks particularly, and also to add comfort to the health of the banks, notwithstanding the COVID impact. As per the Financial Stability Report of January 2021, the Banking Stability Indicator, as of a cutoff date of September 30th, 2020, showed significant improvement in all the 5 dimensions: asset quality, profitability, liquidity, efficiency, and soundness, as relative to March 2020 position. To some extent, it may also be on account of the moratorium and certain regulatory exemptions and legal exemptions which were given, that must have also helped the indicators to show better results. But having seen the April numbers, we are not worse off. Notwithstanding the COVID, still the banking industry is in a reasonably good shape. I'm saying this also with confidence because one of the stress test conducted by Financial Stability, stress test of Financial Stability Report indicates that NPA under the worst case scenario could deteriorate to 14.8%, and also PSB banks in the worst case scenario can go up to 17%. And also, if you look at the capital adequacy ratio, in the worst case scenario, it may move to 12.5%. Capital adequacy ratio going to 12.5%, which is still fairly well placed in terms of the requirements of Basel or requirements of RBI. So in that sense, the banks are adequately capitalized, carry enough cushion buffers to absorb the losses. And this contrasts with our position in 2015-16, when almost 11 banks were under the PCA and were not able to lend. Today, we are adequately capitalized. I'm talking about these NPA numbers, worst case scenario. that worst fears crystallize into reality. But we do believe that things will be better, and the pent-up demand in the economy will come back, and the businesses will start doing well. If business does well, we will do well. But still, even the worst if it crystallizes, still we have enough capital to absorb that and also to continue to support the system. And as was articulated earlier by when the introductory speech was given, we have done quite a bit in the recent past in line with the government initiatives and RBI initiatives in easing pressures for various business, particularly the pain points in finance, be it restructuring and one-time resolution, or one-time restructuring measures for large corporate as well as restructuring for MSME sector, and also emergency credit line, various schemes, and also flexible approach to working capital in terms of relaxing various parameters, be it tenor of LCs or be it LC margins or margins on various working capital requirements, and various other measures which were meant to help businesses in difficult times to better manage their cash position, and also to address their concerns in a changed environment, changed dynamics of COVID impacted economy. We in SBI particularly have also done quite a lot to simplify the processes of our lending and also reduce the response time and enhance the response quality. We have done significant capability building in terms of digital banking. We have our UNO business has matured into a good product and is being used also for trade finance and various other transactions with very well, fairly well received also in our client base, and also contactless lending platform, pre-approved business loans, are various measures that we have taken to deal digitally with reaching out to large number of SME customers. And also we have also tweaked our delivery system organization structure by bringing in senior level functionaries at the rank of assistant general managers to head SME business in various zonal offices, almost all the zonal offices of our bank, with the focused attention on SME credit delivery. And also we have large number of centers, SME centers, to cater to the specific needs of SMEs. Hence, I would like to say that the banking industry in general and public sector banks in particular have done their bit in terms of what they can do to serve the customers, clients in this COVID challenge, in this challenging times of COVID. And also, apart from the nation building, which is part and parcel of our DNA in the long term, we have done a lot to ensure that the impact of COVID is fairly absorbed and support the business is supported by us. And having said that, I have to say that yes, still a lot remains to be done, and it's always a work in progress and an evolving one, where we continue to innovate and grow in terms of what we can do to better address the changing needs of the customers, the changing needs of the customers, economy, and also the competition teaches us from various things. We do believe that we still have to improve our technology, particularly the digital reach, to make sure that it delivers user-friendly services to many of our customers. Few areas I thought I will highlight what the banks can do better, and also what, of course, expectations, like many of you, expectations of bankers also from government, but what bankers can do. See, banks, still, maybe once we are through with the COVID lockdowns and all, still huge community is unbanked, underbanked in that. And we need to continue to see this period of COVID has also taught us various needs to upgrade our technology skills. How do we do that? How do we innovate, forge alliances with, be it fintech or be it NBFC, to see how do we reach out in a cost effective and risk mitigated way large section of the society which does not have the banking facility or which is denied the banking facility. That's one focus area we are all constantly engaging ourselves with. And I do believe that a formidable alliance, if the banking industry can form with NBFCs on the one hand and technology firms, fintech companies on the other. If we can get it right, this probably will ensure that most cost-effective way of delivering financial services to vast majority of people. That is something which is very much there in the agenda for the banking industry. We do focus on that. We are also working on improving our staff skill and our own capabilities in terms of delivery capabilities, and also bring in the process simplicities to ensure that we do that. And some baby steps are taken, still a long way to go. And also the banking industry has to start finding ways to operate with thinner margins. I mean, this is something which none of my banking, this is something which I do believe, I firmly subscribe to that still the banking industry margins, what we call as net interest margin in our banking parlance, we keep it 3.5 kind of a net interest margin. I do believe that banking industry should move into should build its capabilities, technology, people skill, and risk assessment skill to ensure that we grow to operate at much lower net interest margin, because higher net interest margin is always good for the individual bank. Higher margin means the economy is it hurts the efficiency of financial disintermediation. In that sense, it's something which will be good for the economy if banks can operate with lower net interest margin. Having said that, it's not only for the banks to do that, because the net interest margin reduction could be suicidal for the health of the banking industry, because the ecosystem has to grow to reach that kind of operating environment. Credit cost is one major reason why the banks have high net interest margin, and the country still is to mature in the contract enforcement risk, which is a major contributor to credit cost in turn to the high net interest margin and efficiency of economy. Hence, it is important that the ecosystem has to improve in terms of the bank's ability to reduce the margins, so that the overall economy comes down. This is something which I see more a futuristic statement or a perception, that maybe once things stabilize and more competition comes, and also more and more reforms on the legal and other fronts are taken by the government, this is a wish which will turn into a reality. And from the government side, last but not the least, I do believe that infrastructure funding is one area which could be a major game changer. And if only we could get it right, how we fund infrastructure, that could be huge, that could make us a huge economic power. Government is doing its bit. Lot of it is done by the government in terms of identifying projects, in terms of creating a infrastructure pipeline, also setting up an institutional credit delivery system, development of a DFI kind of an institution to focus on infrastructure delivery. Huge money is lying all over the place. And I mean, I was just finding that international investors are showing enough interest in investing in countries like Belarus, countries like Ukraine. Such countries are also attracting investment from investors. If only we get our infrastructure funding model right, create the confidence in investors, I think that huge money can flow. And that is not just a choice, it is that's not a wish. It is, we have no choice about it but to develop that infrastructure. Having said that, government is doing its bit, and a lot needs to be done. And infrastructure funding can help the economy, both sides, both as well as demand as well as on the supply side. That is single biggest hope, and I'm sure that the government is committed to doing it, and that can be the big game changer, as I was mentioning earlier. Having said that, infrastructure funding has its own challenges. The US also has declared that is going to be rebuilding US's Joe Biden's agenda, and then many investors will prefer the domestic investment. Currency risk is not there, so we have to make it really. We have to necessarily build confidence in the investors to attract that investment into our country, to ensure that investment in infrastructure takes off in a big way, and that one single thing that can kickstart the economy, that is infrastructure spending. I I think in conclusion, I just wish to assure you all that the banking industry is fairly well placed today in terms of its intrinsic financial strength and capability, and also digital capability and people capability to support the economy, to support the clients, and play the role of a catalyst to bring the economy back on its track and get back into its growth trajectory. I just wanted to add as a concluding remark that stay assured that banking industry is healthy, and we can support the industry. We can support business to come back once we get over the lockdowns and the economy starts coming back to normalcy. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. It was really heartening to hear you and also hear from you about all the initiatives that have been taken, both in terms of digital as well as what the Reserve Bank is doing. Of course, we'll also be looking at what the Honorable Finance Minister has announced today. So, so moving on with the proceedings, for the first question, I'll request the chairman for the Council of Finance and Banking, Mr. Sanjay Rasivasya, to kindly ask the first question. Over to you, Sanjay.
Yeah, before we just move into the questions, I may not have all the answers, but I will do one thing. If I could give you the answer, I will give. If I have to give a pass, I will take the question. Maybe I will respond back to you.
Yeah.
Also.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, my question is, according to a research report of SBI, the top 15 sectors from more than 10,000 listed entities have reported a debt reduction of 1.7 lakh crore. They have all taken a conservative approach. What will be the strategy of the bank to tackle all this?
Come again, what will be the
bank strategy?
So essentially, I think that I was also mentioning about deleverage. See, out of that 1.7 trillion, 1.5 trillion has come from core industries. If you go deeper into that, some of the core industries like steel and all, and mining, and those are the areas where they have done a large amount of deleveraging, and also refineries, particularly the numbers, whatever Reliance Industries have done also all goes into that. See, essentially speaking, this is the challenge that I was articulating in my speech for the banking industry, that to a large extent, listed entities are paying back debt and also not borrowing for fresh capex, because there's a huge capacity underutilization in the economy, and people are not ready to commit for new capex, and because they have their own concerns about the demand in the economy. So many are deferring capex, so no new investment is happening, and the businesses which are doing well, they are paying back from their own resources to reduce the debt, apart from also raising funding from various investors who are looking, as I was saying, Belarus and all. They were looking for investment opportunities, take money to knock off. Yes, this is something which is hitting us very badly. That is where I do believe that deploying credit at the short way, right now what we are doing is that we are struggling with excess liquidity. We are parking it predominantly with Reserve Bank of India in its repo schemes, at repo rates, while we also try to beat each other in quoting competitively low rates for some of the AAA and the public sector units in parking. But still we are sitting on huge liquidity which is being parked all over the place. And we believe that once the economy bounces back, once the government kickstarts investment in infrastructure, and also core industries start believing, and the belief comes back to the private sector. Though government can kickstart the economy and government cannot go on investing, that the private sector has to develop that confidence that yes, it's time to start the capex. Until then, we will be dealing with this kind of dilemma. And I'm confident that, sir, with 3 months to 6 months time frame, things will start improving, credit will take off. To put it in perspective, huge numbers can come only from large core sector like steel industry, or thermal power, or other tidal power and things like that, or refineries. So those are the areas. Some activity is happening still in polymer kind of spaces, but plenty of money is available globally as well as domestically at a very cheap rate, which we are not able to compete with kind of. So
Right.
growth coming back is key to our getting out of this dilemma. So serious concern.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll request the co-chair for the Council of Banking and Finance, Mr. Samarjit Mitra, to kindly ask his question.
So it was indeed very heartening, and as far as the confidence on the industry and together with the industry on the banking thing growing, and with your reassuring words. But being in that hot seat that you are in, our expectation as well as the government's expectation is often in contradiction to each other. When we say us, shall we talk about the common people? So my question to you is, I mean, with the specific emphasis of the Ministry of Finance regarding increase of branch profitability, leading to merger of branches and the need for financial inclusion of the Indians in the remotest corners, and also the role of fintech that you referred to, how is SBI taking on this challenge of increasing of reach alongside with rationalizing branch profitability today?
Sir, yes, very, very important aspect of banking that you have touched upon. It has been work in progress for quite some time, which I also touched upon when I was making my presentation. In terms of reaching out, branch profitability rationalization, we have observed a vast majority of our branches in terms of SBI associates, and to a large extent, sir, we have been State Bank. I will speak about State Bank and then I will touch the PSUs. State Bank as such, and also the associates, barring few branches, we were generally, the business models were built on the local economy. So, so most of the branches, barring the initial few years any business takes its time to settle down. Most of the branches at the initial few years very actively contribute to the profit in their own might, depending on the space, the economic zone they operate. But most of them are profitable. There are very few branches which have profitability concerns. The reason is State Bank is very much a local bank. We are present all over the country, but we are as local as the cooperative banks you can think of. And all our budgeting exercises all along have been done in such a way that we factor the local economy's needs and finance according to the needs of that particular area. This helped us to stay positive in terms of profitability of at the unit level operations. Having said that, there are certain areas where, as you can appreciate, there are some geographies in the country where economic activity is so low, but still we have certain presence. Those are something which some sort of cross-subsidization is more a national objective or social objective we have been doing. But we do consider ways and means of improving the profitability of those branches also through the financial inclusion, because the poor, if the right model is given, poor pays. That's maybe a topic for another day's discussion. I shouldn't get into. I do believe that it's part of the question that you asked also, that unbanked, underbanked, financial inclusion people, it is a question of banks not getting the model right. That is what has been the problem that the country has been facing. As a bank, State Bank of India is fully conscious of the fact that we have to reach those goals, and we can do it only with the help of technology. So in that sense, what we are doing now, sir, we are also associating actively with technology providers, fintech companies, who are quite innovative in their approach to these issues. And also we are thinking in terms of joining hands with the financial institutions like NBFCs and also institutions like microfinance institutions who understand and who can connect better the local people in some areas where we are not able to reach. And this as a combination, the right technology and local flavor and the bank's huge resources, this model we are working on, and we are also thinking in terms of developing certain subsidiaries to facilitate that. Is still work in progress. I may not be in a position to speak more on that, to ensure that we are able to assess risk properly and price the risk properly and keep the operation costs low so that we create value for the society. It is work in progress. Banking industry is well placed to do that. And particularly this COVID, but notwithstanding all the pains that we suffered, COVID has taught us a lot on the importance and early adoption of digital. And our customers also have moved on to digital platform much with a greater comfort and confidence. So this is going to be good going forward. Once we get out of it, we will be able to do that in this path. And with NBFCs, MFIs and technology people, we will definitely be delivering on that.
Thank you so much, sir. You are very lucid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have our committee member, Shri Mahesh Kyalji. I request him to ask the next question. Mahesh Bhaiya. Mahesh Bhaiya, can you hear us?
Yeah. Sir, I basically represent the exporting community, and I used to be the national vice president of the FIO till a month back. My tenure has been over and associated with the EPC also. So the common problem what the exporter faces with the bank, see, when we take the limits are sanctioned for the export credit finance, pre and the post financing, and while sanctioning the limit, the collateral margin is also taken. Now, banks are taking the ECGC coverage on the pre and post shipments, which gives you the coverage of 60%. Now, on an average, you normally take any collateral security between 20 to 40 or 50%. So, with the 60% coming from the ECGC, for which the for the pre-finance, the exporters are paying premium, and for the post, banks are paying the premium. And 60% coming from there, and 20 to 30% coming from the exporters collateral margin. But still the bank is insisting for the whole turnover policy and the buyer-wise comprehensive policy, which cost millions of rupees to the exporters. And in many cases, exporters are moving away from these banks because the private banks are not insisting for ECGC at all. And even if they insist, they only insist to the extent of the pre and post. So now, by taking the this comprehensive policy, the bankers' coverage is enhanced from 60% to 80%, and there is no further benefit to them. Only your risk coverage is increased from 60 to 80, but it costs crores and crores to the exporters, and good exporters have to pay any amount between 50 lakhs to 1 crore, 2 crores. So this need to be reviewed and looked into, because as such, already with the 60% and 20-25% collateral with a charge on the current assets and the personal guarantees, so bank is already covered by more than 100%.
Maheshji, I think you have a very valid point. It's, in fact, in our effort to make things easier for exporters, we have rationalized quite a bit of our charges last year. In fact, we had several charges for many of the export businesses, both export and import. We have rationalized them in such a way that it is both competitive, it adds some value. But I appreciate your concern, and the cost that the industry or the exporter paying is disproportionate to the benefit that accrues to the bank. Doesn't make any great sense as a country, and also it is our priority to see how the exports stay competitive. And so I do appreciate your point. Maheshji, can I request you, can you please send it across to me, a model
Sure.
In my email address must be there, or I can share it with you. It is
Okay.
dmd.ccg1@sba.co.in.
DN, sir, can you read DMD?
DMD
Yeah.
dot ccg1
CCG1
at sba@sba.co.in.
SBI.co.in.
I would request you to develop a model and show me
Say-
how the cost is disproportionate to the value that is created for the banks, so that we can come on a sound commercial logic and relook at that particular thing. Because basically the lenders, we have a propensity to look at our risk, keep the risk very close to us and look at all mitigations. Many times we fail to appreciate also the pains on the other side. But that is the reason why also we take inputs from the industry. Please do mail it to me. I will definitely take it forward and see how best we can redress your.
In fact, sir, I'm holding a sanction with the State Bank of India for last more than 2 months.
Okay.
During the course of my discussion with the GM in Calcutta, GM office in Calcutta.
Yeah.
So it was in principle agreed that ACGC waiver will be there
Okay.
because we do not sell anything on credit.
Okay.
That is also that I just forgot to mention this clause that now the exporter is not selling anything on credit.
Okay.
The title of goods are with the exporter or with the bank till the payment is received.
Okay.
So the risk is not there.
Okay.
Had it been an open credit sale, then the question comes whether the money will come at all or not.
Absolutely. Even in
Here the title of goods are in the hands of the bank or with the exporter. So, and thereafter the branch has referred it to the again to the zonal office here for their approval, and it is lying in pending for the last 6 to 7 months, and for pending that's the clearance.
One thing is that at the individual level, unless we modify at the policy level, some of the aspects individual, I wouldn't be able to comment on that individually because I have not seen the full dynamics. But I do believe that if that doesn't add value, it only adds cost to the system. We have a reason to take a view on the review of that particular class. I request you to send it across to me.
I will do
and
so.
Also, if your particular case also, you can just make a mention about it in a separate mail and see whether I can do something to help you out.
Definitely, sir. Definitely, sir. Any inputs do you have right now? Nirmala FM has said that export credit line limit has been enhanced from 3 lakh crore to 4,50,000 crore.
Okay.
आप डायरेक्ट लिख देंगे अच्छा होगा, काफी क्वेश्चंस हैं ऑलरेडी.
चलिए, okay sir.
So I have a reporter here who has just WhatsApped me a question. I will just repeat what he has said. Last Thursday at a MCCI event, the principal economic advisor Sanjeev Sanyal ji said that while capital market is doing well, there is risk aversion in banking channel and credit growth is muted. In this context, what is the outlook on credit growth in financial year 22? And why is there such risk aversion? When is credit demand expected to pick up?
Sir, risk aversion, I wouldn't say that risk aversion is not there at all in the system. But having said that, if you, risk aversion, will keep it aside for a moment to look at the poor credit offtake. Capital market doing well is a factor of excess liquidity. I'm sure all of us know where the money is coming and how it is going, and lot of activities happening in the capital market. But having said that, credit offtake is low because of hardly any capex which is happening in the private sector. You can have a discussion with some of the industry leaders. It is very obvious that people are waiting to take a view on the economy. Nobody is willing to take the risk. They do have their own concerns about the demand, and most of them are deferring their capex plans. And also, documentary evidence with our utilizations also show that there are large capacity underutilizations that exist in the system. So when the existing capacities are underutilized, the commitment to put money in fresh capex is a factor of confidence. It is not that the capacity will reach 100% and then only industry will start getting capex. No, I agree that entrepreneurs in their vision, if they see when the capacity is nearing certain optimum level, they start looking to build new capacities. That comes from the confidence which is slightly missing in the industry. We also have interaction with various industry leaders as part of our job. We do get a feeling that people are on a wait and watch mode. So addressing the concern when the credit offtake will happen, credit offtake can happen only when the investment cycle comes back, and the investment cycle will come back only when the confidence grows in the private sector. And that will, my sense is that investment cycle will happen. First, money will come. I mean, infrastructure spending, government-driven investments in the economy will be the starting point, which itself will help us to also start deploying some of our money, and credit offtake will happen, and private investments will follow after that once the confidence comes back to the system. So until then, there may be this challenge which I was mentioning, that we are sitting on one side a higher growth of deposits and excess liquidity which we park in certain schemes, and not finding acceptable avenues to deploy credit. That is the dilemma challenge that we are facing today. I'm sure that once we successfully get out of COVID, investment cycle will start, credit offtake will start. And as to risk aversion, which was also there in the question, is not such a major issue. Yes, there can be some more confidence that can be built in the system for the lending community officers, which is also there to some extent. I think government also in its right earnest has brought in certain changes and has brought in certain comfort measures for officers to freely exercise their mind. And so risk aversion is not a major thing, and credit offtake is not because of risk aversion, but more so because of lack of demand.
Thank you, sir. We have Mahesh Goenkaji. Maheshji, please ask your question.
Yeah, sir, what is your outlook on steel industry? In Eastern India, we have a lot of steel industry producing. Now, generally, SBI was negative on granting loan to steel industry. What is your present outlook?
Sir, steel industry is one of the best performing industries today, and in fact, I have been associated with the steel industry in 2014, 15, 16. And I used to handle, sitting in Delhi, I used to handle Bhushan Steels of and also Jindals of steel industry during those difficult times of import dumping by China and production costs above the sales cost kind of situation, where the steel industry was struggling. Those were 2000, I think 14, 15, 16 time. But right now, I think steel industry is in a prosperous mode, and almost everybody is glowing in profit. Almost all the industry leaders are reporting month after month, year after year, growing EBITDA. So we are quite positive on the steel industry, sir. Not that we are any more negative on that. Only thing is that within the steel industry, some of the balance sheets which are highly leveraged create some concerns, because today industry is doing well, and steel industry with the infrastructure spending and construction activity revival, steel industry will definitely continue to do well. And economic recovery, if it is built on infrastructure, construction and automobile and things like that, steel will definitely continue to do well. But having said that, having seen that 14, 15, 16 period, a highly leveraged balance sheet creates its own anxiety if there is going to be a downward pressure on price, and if the margins shrink, that could be cause of concern. But we are quite positive on the sector, and we do support the steel industry.
Sir, another small question. You see, some people have been having current account as well as OD account, and OD was primarily against their own fixed deposits. And suddenly, your bank has just closed their current account without asking them, without notice to them.
Sir, it's a mistake.
Hello? And they say they have just closed the current account, and they said that you can only have OD account. what is this? Because this current account was always operational, and it has been submitted to all the income tax department and others. And it was a OD against their own fixed deposit. It is not a OD in the real sense.
Maheshji, if you have any specific personal thing, please send the.
No, it is not personal. It is general because it has happened to
No,
me.
please. I mean,
Coffee questions have already.
we have already overshot. We already overshot our time. It's been 1 hour 15 minutes.
I will quickly address that also.
Okay.
Sir, the Reserve Bank of India has given us a mandate to close because of huge diversions and losses and some wrongdoings by some defaulters. They have directed the banking industry to ensure that money is routed only to the operating cash credit account. And in that process, there were certain current accounts which were closed. But the case in point that you are referring, it is a mistake. If you have only overdraft account against your deposits, we must have done a mistake, and we can, I mean, whatever it is required, we will do the correction. But it must be a mistake on our part. But generally, it's a regulatory prescription to ensure that sale proceeds of borrowers are routed through the main cash credit account. That is a guideline, sir.
That is fine, sir. Kindly look into it.
Thank you,
Sure,
sir.
sir, sure. Magajji, it is a mistake. We have to correct it. That
Okay.
particular reference.
Thank you.
I think last question.
Yeah, we'll take the last question. This is by Mr. R.P. Ratolia, who is the former CMD of Central Coalfields Limited. Is it Government of India has launched commercial coal mining with a lot of expectations. However, the initiative cannot be successful unless proper financing by the bank. What is the policy of SBI for financing this sector?
Sir, I'm not too sure whether the question emerges from the green concerns, and I'm not too sure. But we do have our own investors insisting on green energy focus on not financing polluting sectors. But having said that, we in State Bank of India, as the country is still a coal-dependent economy, we do not have any issue in financing coal mining. As long as there is compliance to environmental and other statutory compliance is there, we will be financing it. We are not negative on coal financing. And incidentally, one of our top borrowers is NTPC. And Coal India is another major client for us. So we as a bank, we as a country are still on coal, though futuristically speaking, we would like to slowly move away from coal into green. But as of now, we don't have any policy which prohibits us from funding coal.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. We've already taken a lot of your time. So 1 hour we have already overshot it by
1 hour 15 minutes.
It's already 4:16. So sir, thank you very much. And I'll just request Sanjay Bhaiya to kindly propose the word of thanks.
Thank you, dear Rishabh. After this very engaging and informative session on outlook on the economy due to COVID surge and impact on the banking sector, I take this opportunity to wholeheartedly thanks our guest, Sri V.K. Radhakrishnan, Deputy Managing Director, State Bank of India, for his gracious presence and insights. His lucid comments on the economy and impact of COVID on the banking sector has enlightened and about the current issues. We are pleased to know that the economy outlook remains bright and India's forex reserves are at record high level. The knowledge that he had shared with us today will be valuable as business start functions normally post-lockdown. We are grateful to Sri Radhakrishnan sir for sharing his valuable thoughts with us. I also thank our media friends for their continued support and hope that they will suitably cover today's proceedings. I thank you all once again for joining this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.